Welcome to lesson 4.7. In this lesson, students are going to review the vocabulary of circles. We're going to go over some of the basics so that you can remember them from grade 6. And we're going to learn to draw a circle graph using percent circle. And then we're going to do the same thing drawing it using angles. So you're going to be using some materials. You can take a look at what you need here. We have a measuring handout that I'm not going to give you in this lesson because I'll just do the measurement of the angles on the smartboard here so you can take a look at it. We will talk about percent circles and I'll show you one. You are going to need a compass, a protractor, a ruler, and you will need a calculator. So at this point now that we're in lesson 4.7, you should be able to tell me the definition of a circle, a radius, and a diameter, and you should understand at a very high level what these three things are. So for example, a circle is a closed loop that never varies never has the distance from the center to the outside of the line never changes. The radius is always from the center of a circle out to the line, and the diameter is the distance across the center of a circle going through the middle, and it's the largest possible chord. Now, we're also going to talk about some of the angles, and again, we've done some of this stuff already. An acute angle is an angle which is less than 90 degrees. Okay. An obtuse angle is greater than 90, but it's less than 180. So this one falls between 90 and 180. A right angle is equal to 90 degrees. So we have the three angles which are based on 90s. Acute being less, obtuse being greater, and a right angle being equal. Now the other two have to do with 180. A straight angle is equal to 180 degrees, and a reflex angle is greater than 180, but it's less than 360. So if we had to draw these angles that you could see them, what we're talking about with acute angles would be drawn something like this, and this angle in here is less than 90. An obtuse angle would look like this, and this angle here is greater than 90. A straight angle, I'm going to put a vertex in the middle there so you can see there's actually two rays put together. This angle right here is actually equal to 180 degrees. The reflex angle is the angle that's on the outside of a normal angle that you draw, like an acute or an obtuse, and this one here is greater than 180, but less than 360. And of course the right angle, the fifth angle, that's the one that's equal to 90 exactly. So these are the angles that you should be able to identify and you should have no trouble with. Okay? Okay, take and get rid of that. So angles, when we're talking about angles, we measure angles with a protractor. There are several types of protractors up there. The most common type of protractor that you're going to get is one that looks like this one right here. Okay. You can also get ones which are 360, and they're ones that look like that. So you should have one of these in your geometry sets, and we will get to use those in a minute. We've already gone over how to measure a little bit with them already, so you should be quite comfortable with that. Circles are drawn using what we call a compass. And again, we've done a whole exercise on compasses, so you should identify that the compass basically looks like this, and you should have no trouble with that one. And when we draw circle graphs, what we're doing is they're composed of sectors. And a sector is basically a piece of what some people refer to as a piece of pie, like a pie piece, because circle graphs sometimes are called pie graphs. But that sector represents some part of a quantity that we're graphing. So you can see here that on the right-hand side, I've got a circle graph. It's divided up into parts. Because we're going to start with a percent circle, this whole circle here represents 100%. So we take a piece of something, we're going to cut it into parts. Each individual part right here is referred to as a sector. And you can see I've marked 3 sectors there out of the 5. What we have to have you do next is be able to create these angles. So what I'm going to start right now is we're going to get you to do some measuring of some angles. Now again, we've done some of this already, so you should be familiar with it. But I'm going to grab an angle here, and this angle is an acute angle, and I need to measure the angle which is marked with the arc. To do that, I need to have a compass. So I'm going to grab my compass, and there it is right there. It always appears up here, so I'll have to bring it back down. To measure an angle, you have to take what's called, I don't know what you want to call it, the crosshairs, but this part right there, that little section right there, that has to be on the vertex of the angle. So that part has to be right there, and it has to be perfect. If you're off by even, a part of a millimeter, what's going to happen is that when we go to measure the angle, it won't measure accurately. So that's the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab this and we're going to move it down so it fits exactly on that location. The other thing that has to happen is this part of the protractor, you can see where the 0 is here and the 180, I have to move that down and it has to be on that line. Now when you're measuring the angle, you'll notice there's 2 scales on your protractor. You have a scale which is on the outside right here, and you have a scale which is on the inside. When you measure an angle, you always start at 0. Now if you don't like using the inside scale first, what you can do is grab your protractor and just spin it until your 0 on the outside falls on the line, which is up top. You'll notice that my crosshairs has moved a little bit, so I've got to make sure that I make this as perfect as possible. Okay? Now, if you notice, I can now take my protractor and I can count 10, 20, 30, 40, and then taking a look in here, you'll see 41, 42, 43, 44. It lines up exactly on 45 degrees. Okay? Now, if I was going to measure this on the other scale, the outside scale, I'm just going to erase all this for a second. Okay? I'm going to take my protractor, I'm going to spin it, and notice that I still make sure that the vertex is perfect. I want to make sure that it lines up perfectly on this line. And this one here, I can actually use a slider to go up. And you can see it goes up to right there. And I have a little arrow there that'll show you the angle is actually 45 degrees. But when you're counting this one, you start on the inside and you start at 10. You see the 10 starts right there? I can't draw over top of this, but here's 10, 20, 30, 40, I guess I can. Then you slip out to here. You see that's where 40 is, and then you start counting the angle, so the amount of degrees on a smaller scale on the outside. And you can see it still comes out to be 45 degrees. So what I want you to do now is you'll notice on the next page there's another angle 2 here. I want you to take a second and I want you to measure this angle, and then I will measure it with the protractor and you can compare the angles and see how well you did. So go ahead and do that right now. Okay, I'm going to grab my protractor, got to bring it down. I'm going to make sure I line it up perfectly. It has to be lined perfectly. It must be on the 0. This line here has got to be perfectly down that 0, 100 line. And then I'm going to count up. I'm going to move from the inside here. So I got 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. And if I slide out, you'll see that right here, my angle is almost, or just barely past the 70 degree mark. So my angle here is probably 70 degrees for the most part. You have to be accurate to the nearest degree. So I'd accept 70, 71 here easily as an angle for you to do. If you got 73, that'd be unacceptable. You're really telling me that this angle is, well, here's 70, 73 would be marked right about there. And that's too far away. All right? And underneath 70, you could have 69. 68 is too far away. At the grade 6 or grade 7 level, you should be able to measure the nearest angle without any difficulty. Okay, so take a second and measure angle 3. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up. Remember, the vertex has got to be on the crosshairs. You notice my line right here lines up exactly on the 0, 100 line. And I'm going to count up from the 0. So I've got 10, here's 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, slide out, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76 degrees here. All right. If you got 75, that's acceptable. If you got 77, that's acceptable. But if you got anything lower or higher than those two values, you would get the question wrong. Okay, now that was angle 3. Try angle 4. Now this time we have an obtuse angle, so you should be more than 90 degrees. So measure this angle. All right, so bringing in my protractor. You can see that I have to line it up just like I did before. All right, I've got my lines right here, 0 and 100 are lined up perfectly. I've got the vertex perfect right there, so everything's lined up perfectly. And now I can take a look at my angle, start counting. Now I've got a 0 here, so it's 10, whoops, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, slide out, and you can see that we've got 2 degrees past the 110. Okay, that means my angle is going to be 112 degrees. Now, if you measure with the wrong scale, you're going to come out here and you're going to say that the angle is 60, and you're going to get to here, it's going to be 68 degrees. Now, if you think about it, that's not possible because this angle is actually an obtuse angle, which means it has to be greater than 90 degrees. So if you use the wrong scale, it won't match whether it's obtuse or acute. All right, now, normally what would happen in this class right now is I'd get you to draw some angles, and then you would exchange them with the person beside you, and you would check each other's work. But since you're at home, it's impossible to do. But if you want to get your parents to do it, or if you have somebody else with you, you can feel free to draw an angle of 40 degrees, and then measure it, and give it to the person, and have them double check your work. Now, degrees are one thing. We'll get to degrees and drawing circle graphs with degrees. But first off, we're going to start with a percent circle. The reason we start with a percent circle is we've already completed our unit on percent, so it's actually something which is very similar to what you've already done. Okay. You can see here that you should be able to draw angles. We're going to be using 2 types of handles to draw the circle graphs. The first one's a percent circle, and then we'll do the other one later. To create a circle graph, we have to calculate the percents of something, and then we'll be able to put it onto the circle graph, which has the percents measured on it. So let's take a look at the first one. Eve is studying for his final exams. Okay, maybe my pronoun's wrong or not. She set aside, yeah, okay, my pronoun is wrong. How do I fix that right? Eve is studying for her final exams. She set aside 10 hours to study. So we got 10 hours total. She studied 4 hours for math, 2.5 hours for LA, 2 hours for science, and 1.5 hours for social. Create a circle graph to show how much she studied. So we're going to start with math. Now, I know that she has 10 in total, and she studied for math for 2.5 hours. So starting with my fraction, I really am taking 2.5 out of 10. Now, I understand that you can't have a decimal in a fraction, but we're just going to treat it like that for a second. So now I need to take 2.5 out of 10, and I'm going to turn this into a percent. So to do that, just like we did before, you take and divide by the 10, 2.5 divided by 10, I'm going to convert this to a decimal. That gives me 0.25. And now to convert a decimal to a percent, you multiply by 100. So 0.25 times 100 means that this is 25%. Now I'm going to move on to science, LA, and social by doing the exact same thing. Moving on to science, it says here she studied, oh, I did something wrong here. Yeah, I did. Let's back up for a second. She studied 4 hours for math and 2.5 hours for LA. So I'm just going to grab this. This is the LA stuff. So I'm just going to move this over to LA, or move this down to LA. If you caught that, wonderful. But I just made a mistake. Okay, so my LA is actually 25%. My math, she studied 4 hours, but it doesn't change much. It's going to be 4 out of 10. So 4 divided by 10 is equal to 0.4. 0.4 times 100, I'm still converting it into a decimal, is 40%. So I do the same thing. I convert it into a decimal, then I convert it into a percent. Now science, reading a little bit more carefully this time, 2 hours for science. So for science we have 2 out of 10. So convert this to a decimal. 2 divided by 10 is 0.2. And then 0.2 times 100 means that science was 20%. And you can use subtraction for social if you wished, or you can, work it out mathematically. 1.5 out of 10 becomes 1.5 divided by 10, which is 0.15, and 0.15 times 100 gives you 15%. Now, if everything is done correctly, you should be able to take all of your percents and add them up, and it should give you 100. So I've got 40 and 25 and 20 and 15. So 40 and 25 is 65, 65 and 20 is 85, and 85 and 15 is 100. So because my percentages all have to be 100%, I can be confident that I did everything correctly. So the next step is to move and put this stuff onto my circle graph on the next page. So I now have to take the math and put it on to 40%. So this is a circle graph. This particular one is divided up into 10 equal spaces. Each one of those spaces has got marks on the outside which show you 1%. So if you counted all the little tiny tick marks around the outside, there's basically 100 of them. I need to take my first one, which if you go back here, is math, and it's 40%. So I'm going to have to mark off 40%. So with a ruler, I need to have a starting point. So I'm going to grab right here. This is where I'm going. Oh, didn't want that one. This thing doesn't always work the way you want it to. Let's see if I can get this thing to disappear here. All right. I need a line, and that line is from here to there. That's my starting point. And from this starting point, I'm going to measure off, and if you go back here, you'll see I need 40%. Now each sector is 10, so I'm just going to draw this in. I'll erase it. There's 10% right there. There's another 10. There's another 10. And finally, there's the other 10. So I've got 40% there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my line, and this here will mark off 40%. Now this is the time that was spent studying math. On the outside, I'll take that out of there. This here is math, and it is 40%. So this part right here, normally we would have some sort of a way to color it in. I don't have coloring, so I'm going to just use cross-hatching using the color blue. So math is in blue, and I've got 40%. Okay, if I go back next, my next I'm going to do is LA, and that's 25%. So going on to here, we're going to change to a different color. So 25%. This here, there's 10, there's 20. Now 25% only gets halfway through the next one. So I'm going to grab my line. I'm going to come from the middle. I'm going to go out. There's 25% there. Okay, so I've got 10 here, 10 here, and 5 there. So that makes 25%. So I'm going to erase that so it doesn't get in the way. And this part here, cross-hatch it just slightly different. And if I go back to what I was doing here, this is LA. It is 25%. The part which says LA 25%, that's referred to as a label. So I've got the 40 and the 10 for math, and I've got the LA, which is 25. The next step is to go back and pick up the second last piece. Science is 20%, and social is 15. So I'm going to go to science next, which is 20%. Now remember, I'm halfway through this one sector, so I've got 5 here, and I have to get 20, so there's 10, so I have to be halfway through this one in order to make 20%. Okay, here's 5, so 5, 10, 5 makes my 20% that I need. Now this is my science. So science was 20%. Okay, change colors and go to red for science. Okay, so there's science. Now normally would color this in, but I don't have time at this point. That leaves me with my last one, which should be perfect. And you'll see I've got social at 15%. If everything was done correctly, I should have 15% left for social. And you can see right here, social is 15%. And of course, that's what's left. Here's my 15 for social. Okay, so now, because it's a graph, I have to have a title. So this is the time spent studying. So I have a title, and I have everything drawn the way it's supposed to be drawn. Now with a percent circle, I just have percents. It's pretty straightforward, fairly easy to do. If you have any questions on how to do this part, just back up and watch this section again. Okay, now normally percent circles could be used as we go higher and higher in math. We get away from the percent circles. Curriculum states that I'm supposed to show you how to do it, but right after they've done that, they tell you that we don't normally use it. We have to move on to using angles. So let's take a look at the angle question. Bob is wondering where all his money went. So we created a simple circle graph to show basically where his expenses are going. He has $600 a month that he makes on his part-time job. The following is a breakdown of where he spends it. He spends $200 on junk food. His bike payments are $250. His clothes he spends $50 on, and he spends he spends $100 on his girlfriend. So what we have to do is to calculate what is the percentage that's being used on each one of these amounts. Now I've kind of shortened this up. It probably shouldn't have been done this way, so I'm going to go back up and just sort of do a little bit of an erase here because I don't want to have you doing this part this particular way. We'll do it the old way that you were taught, and then you won't have to worry about doing it incorrectly. All right, so junk food. If you want to find out how he spends his junk food, the first thing we have to do is to take the amount of junk food he has and convert it into a decimal. To do that, I have to have a total. Now we know that he spends $600 in total, so his junk food is going to be his $200. We're going to divide that by 600, and that means when I turn this into a decimal, I'm going to get 0.3 repeating. Now I have to convert that into a percent, and then I have to convert it into take that percent and turn that percent into a degree. Now there's a way around this to shorten things up. Rather than taking 0.3 of 100, we can take 0.3 of 360, because there's 360 degrees in a circle. Right? So 0.3 times 360, if you grab your calculator. Okay, here we go. So grab your calculator, and we're going to make it bigger. I've got 0.33. Now fill your calculator up. Fill your calculator up and multiply that by 360 degrees. That means that this angle for his particular junk food is 119 degrees, and you'll see it's 0.9999988. So round it off to 120 degrees. So that is what the angle of the sector is going to be for his junk food. We're going to do the same thing for his clothes. His clothes are $50. So 50 bucks divided by 600 means when I turn that into a decimal, it's 0.083 repeating. And then I'm going to multiply that by 360. So 0.083 repeating times 360. And move this down here. But on my calculator, 0.083. Now the 3 repeats, so fill your calculator. Multiply that by 360. And that means that the angle is going to be 29.99999, so it's basically 30 degrees. So for his clothes, we need the sector to be 30 degrees. The bike payments, 250 bucks out of his 600, means that as a decimal, that's 0.416 repeating. So 0.416 repeating, multiplying that by 360, and I'll shorten things up. It comes out to be 150 degrees. And I think I've got things. The girlfriend is $100. Divide that by by 600. And that gives you 0.16 repeating. And then 0.16 repeating times 360 gives you 60 degrees. All right? Now, I know that I've got some of the stuff sort of slid around the wrong spot, but this is how you're supposed to do it. Take the total, find out what each part is from the total, turn it into decimal, multiply that by 360. That will get you the degree. So for my junk food, we're looking at 120 degrees. For the bike payment, we're looking at 150 degrees. For the clothes, we're looking at 30 degrees. And for his girlfriend, we're looking at 60 degrees. Now if you add 120, 150, 30, and 60 degrees all together, you will get a 360 degree circle. So now the next step is to go to drawing a circle and putting the protractor in. Now I've never tried this on the smartboard before, so hopefully this will work out relatively quickly and easily. First off, I need a circle. There's my circle. Try to make it as big as I can. Now, I just lost my, I'm going to redo this. I forgot to keep my center. I need a dot for my center. Now I'm going to grab the circle. Okay. The reason I need my center is I have to have the center when I do the first part. So I need to have a starting point, so I'm going to start right here, straight up. My first sector, if you go back on the page, is supposed to be 120 degrees. So you grab your protractor, and you bring it down here, and I need it to be 120 degrees. So I'm going to put that on the center. Now I have to rotate this. There we go, 120 degrees. So there's 0. I need 120 degrees. Now you'll notice over here, as I start counting, I can go this way and I count 10, 20, 30, 40, 120 degrees is right there. So that's where I put a mark on my line, and I would move my protractor out of the way. And from the center out, I need to go from the blue dot out to here. Now that there is my junk food. That's 120 degrees. So this would be labeled as junk food. And this one here, because it's not a percent circle, we don't put the angle in, we're going to put in the amount of money. This was $200. So that's how much the circle would represent if it was $200. Now the next one is the bike payments. So I'm going to bring back my protractor, but I'm going to set my protractor up and spin it so that I can use this as my 0, and I need to get 150 degrees for the bike payment. So 150 degrees, you look around the outside of the circle, you can see 10, 20, 30, 40, 150 is way over here. So put a mark on your line, move your protractor out of the way, and from the middle, coming out, there is 150 degrees. So this is the bike payments. And it's $250. Alright, make sure you put your units in. Now, the next part was the close, and they were 30 degrees. So grabbing your protractor, bring it back in, put it on the circle, and then rotate it around until you're on 0. And now count up 30 degrees, mark your circle. Here's my 30 degrees right there. So now I can move this out of the way, and taking my ruler, I'm going to start from the middle, I'm going to go right out to here, and this is the amount of money he spends on clothes, $50. CLOTHES. Not 150. These clothes were $50. Alright, so there's your first 3 sectors. The last sector, if we measured it, and you find out that it's actually, for his girlfriend, it should be 60 degrees. So just to double check to make sure we haven't made a huge mistake, you can grab that, you can set it up, and you can see that because we've had a little bit of variation along the way, every time you draw the diagram, you might have a little bit out. So the last one's not always perfect, but we do know that he spent on his girlfriend, he spent $100 a month. So now you can get rid of your protractor, and come on, get rid of that. Okay, there we go. grab your eraser, get rid of all the lines, the tick marks, you don't need them. And you'll notice, if you wanted to, you could take and color them out by putting in the blue for this. You could put the green in for this one. You can use a pencil crayon, lightly color it. And then here's your clothes. And then finally, there you go. So now what we've created is a bar graph, circle graph, which shows how he spent his time. The one thing that's still missing is I need a title. In this case, the title is Bob's Spending. So he now has a picture of where his money went, and from the picture you can see that the majority of his money is going to his bike payment. He spends most of the second one would be on his junk food, and the last one is his girlfriend, and finally he spends the least amount on his clothes. So at this point in time, we'll send you off to do your assignment. If you have any questions on how to do this, just back it up and rewatch this over and over until you can do it. If you have any questions, feel free to come on in and talk to me.